Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And as always, we'll start with some news around EVE, which first of all, the website got like a facelift for the news page. Now I still have to make my way around that one a little bit because I liked when it was a very clear category for the dev blogs, where I personally feel like there's always good information. I tended to go through those quite often and cover videos, but can't really find it, so we'll see how they handle dev blogs going forward. And then one of the news items has been that the expert systems have gone online, and I'll be honest, a little bit disappointed that we didn't get a dev blog with the full details on that, so that we could give feedback on potential pitfalls and things like that with the with potential problems for the system. You know, many minds, I think, will figure that stuff out a lot more efficiently, but, you know, they decided to go live without that, and yeah, it kind of shows that there seems to be some pressure, at least, to find new ways to monetize EVE Online as well, probably coming from the overlords at Pearl Abyss, that are actually the owners at the moment. But yeah, let's keep it in mind, of course, it's a company, it's not a charity, so this is going to be part for the road. But yeah, I'm really curious to see how dev blogs will be handled now with the new website outlook, and yeah, this first really feature that was somewhat controversial, not super controversial, not as controversial as some of the others, but definitely I thought that we would get the details before they would launch it. So far all I really saw was that you could get like a couple of expensive packages for just general ship improvements, and to get into a mining barge for a week. Okay, mining barge, gotta be like a little bit careful there. I'm not really sure what it unlocks exactly, but mining yields for alpha players is something that was on the radar and probably still is on the radar for CCP. You don't want to overdo it with that. And then there's a couple of smaller packages for like Amar, Kaldari, etc. for the exploration path for them to explore. So far doesn't look too disruptive, but again, yeah, would have loved to see the details before that was launched. In-game news, I noticed that the siege of M2 has been broken, the keep star is down, and so now I think that the war is going to you know, go back into a different space, basically, where it's no longer about trying to unlock that super fleet from the system, and they'll probably be able to field it more often. We'll see if more big newsworthy battles, or well, I think all battles are newsworthy, but like international real-life newsworthy battles are up and coming in the war there. It's going to be pretty interesting, I think, going forward. Even from the sidelines, it's definitely massively entertaining. Next up, let's take a quick look at the new Eden store then, and I don't think we'll see expert systems here, so we do have, alright, the federal police skins. These do look really amazing. I love to fly with the Ishtar having a police skin. And then the Brutix also looks pretty good. We get some bundles front and centers, some new Dominic's Federal Police skin, Thanatos as well. Oh, that's, I mean, honestly, these are really good looking skins with some light animations, but nothing too major. So that's definitely worth looking into. Hyperion, definitely like that. Yeah, Dominic's Navy issue. Who knows, maybe I should grab Dominic's and make it a police skin for my mission ship. We'll see how that works out. But I also want to take a quick look at the services. Yeah, it's still the same thing. You don't have the expert systems here, as was actually announced in the news article. These would not be tradable. They're basically purchases that give you a buff for 1 week, and that buff, you know, doesn't go away, cannot be traded, and also is not lost when you're potted, so, or when your ship is destroyed. All right, that means that we get to move on to the market itself, the reason why everyone is here, of course, and as always, we'll start with plex and stuff coming in at 420. Like that, and you may already have seen it from the ticker, but we're seeing more pressure on the price of plex, pronounced 1 year low point at this point, and yeah, the average price is going well below 2.4 million. So you can see here a little bit of resistance, and then nope, we're breaking through that, and we're now starting to test 2.3 million on some of the daily averages. It's still just above 2.4 million for the sellers in JITA, but the buyers are going down. Look at that, 2.25 million for the first buyer of plex. Really not my expectation, but there it is. We go to almost 2.3 million for the buyers in the player-owned trade hubs, and then 2.428 down to 2.403 in the player-owned trade hubs as well. So 2.4 to 2.3 million. We're basically another 100,000 ISK down from, let's say, a month ago or so, and we're testing new lows. Those buyers, apparently are getting plex sold to them to get these average prices. So more pressure in the plex market at the moment. And it does look like, deflationary fears are starting to take hold. This is a very interesting chart, of course, showing, in my opinion, the potential. It's another 1 year low point. Now, I have a lot of plex, and as a partner, CCP actually gives me some plex every 3 months, I think it is. And so as a result, I don't need to invest in this. But I would say that slowly buying, so that's always my warning, slowly grabbing some plex now that they are relatively affordable. I would say 2.4 million. We haven't seen that in a long time. In fact, 2.3 million on a buy order will probably get you some plex. It could be worth looking into that. And hell, with the new arrangement where it's 500 plex for a 30-day game time, you can actually start your investment with even with 10 plex or something like that, or maybe 30 plex if you want to go for around a 100 million investment, which is what I tend to jump in at for like the first time. It's definitely something that you can consider, but yeah, keep in mind, to me this is also quite unexpected. 2.5 million was like defended decently successfully for most of the year. We broke through that. We broke through 2.4 like it's nothing. We're now testing 2.3. This may really not be the bottom yet, but I'll also give you guys that one warning, which I've found out doing trading in Tech 2 ships. When the prices are going down, that's when you have the best opportunities to grab the stuff from the buy orders. Once we bottom out, once we're back on the upswing, it's the sellers that start to dictate the market again, and then buying from buy orders becomes a lot harder to do. So, you're trying to time this right. I think on the downtrend, loading up on some of these plex, in small numbers, I think would start to make sense if I look at this chart. Then we've got the multiple pilot training certificate, which of course is starting to mirror that as well, and we're breaking down to less than 1.2 billion for the average price here as well. In fact, the first seller is coming in at 1.2 billion round, and buyers are at 1.1 billion. Talk about a decently affordable, relatively of course, 30 days training time for a second character on your account. Now, back when we started, let me know in the comments when you start playing EVE Online what the prices were for 30 days training time. I think I still saw 600 and 800 million ISK, 800 million definitely, 600 I think when I started, and I think it may have started quite a little bit lower than that. So, on the long term, inflation is definitely still a reality, but it's pretty obvious that the last year, with the changes to resources, the changes now to ISK generation, have put us in a little bit of a deflationary vice, which for the affordability of this stuff, of course, if you find your way into a nice earning profession in EVE Online, it makes it easier and easier to actually plex your account. This is also lower prices in plex and in these real life related items do tend to show successful fights against bots, because they tend to be the one that of course manage to create so much ISK into the game, above the average that you get these ridiculous pricings that go up to crazy levels. So I would say, maybe the fight against bots is happening behind the scenes, and may have hit them hard here as well. After that, we've got the skill extractors, same story of course, breaking through 280 and landing on 270. All right, interesting, 270 for the sellers, 264 for the buyers. So honestly, we don't need that much new supply in order to break this down to less than 270, and then who knows, right? We could be in for another step down. On the other hand, looking at this 1 year chart, of course, if you want to start your investments in skill extractors, it is going to be possible now to grab them from these buy orders below 270. Just make sure that you still have some ISK left to buy if we go down even lower. Let's take a look at the impact on the injector market. Next here is the large scale injectors that have stalled, right? These here, this is 1, 2, 3 times now that we're testing 630. Let's see if the market decides to break that. 633 for the sellers, 602 for the buyers. So definitely a lot of pressure, and you can see on some days the daily averages are down to that price. But this is exactly what I was talking about right here. The market is not sure if it wants to go lower. So it constantly looks like maybe we're forming a bottom, and then on most days it's pretty obvious that in order to grab a large scale injector, you're gonna have to pay your 632, 633 million for one of these sellers, because on those days almost no one is dumping them for just above 600 million. But from time to time it is tested. There's a couple of people with less patience out there that dump to them. Then you get these strange average prices. But yeah, over the last, let's say, start from here 2.5 months, I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days where that happened. It's a lot harder to grab cheap large scale injectors from the buy prices when the chart is looking like this, compared to when Plex is looking like this, for instance, or the skill extractors are also still on the downtrend. Here your buy orders have a much better chance of triggering. Then we've got these small scale injectors that are also continuing their sideways movement, not really even trying to defend 130. They found their range, it seems, and again showing that perhaps some bottom is already being formed in the injector market. 128 million for the sellers and 119 for the buyers. And then here you can see that these daily averages, especially the last week or so, are definitely on the higher bound for these prices. So it's really difficult to grab a small scale injector below 120 million at the moment. If we try to get 120 on the chart, that's here. The buyers are trying, but it's really again bottom formation, and then the sellers start to take over. So if you want to invest in a small scale injector, you're gonna have to pony up 127, 128 million. But if you want to try a skill extractor, you can probably try a buy order and try to grab it below 270. So that's definitely a big difference, and a reason why if you want to do that investment, you have to start on time, and why I always say don't put all your eggs in that one basket, but make sure that you try to buy at those downtrends through the buy orders. I think those tend to be the best returning buys that you can do. For the daily alpha injectors, all right, we finally have a little bit of a pullback after a couple of months of declining prices, down to 37.5 million. Now that's still an average price for the year, but considering how strong October, November, December were, this did feel like quite a punishing decline here. We were back up to 40 million, so a little bit of a comeback here. 39 in fact for the sellers and 36 million for the buyers, showing a little bit of interest. Perhaps what could be happening here as well is that these expert systems have reignited the interest a little bit, and it could be a gateway, right? Try an expert system, find out, all right, I really do enjoy mining in a mining barge, so start to invest in daily alpha injectors as you earn ISK to build up your mining character, and then eventually, of course, hopefully, they make the transition to an Omega character, so that they can just enjoy the full game, all the potential skills, and they can go from there. But these daily alpha injectors, I've said that before, also a very doable goal, just for someone that's looking for that character progression boost, right? Make 40 million, buy daily alpha injector, grab those extra skill points, and then make your next 40 million. For Plex, it may feel like it's affordable, but it's still, you need 500 Plex for 30 days game time, so it's affordable for the investor perspective, but not necessarily for the user. That's still pretty damn expensive, of course, in the grand scheme of things. And then finally, we've got the hypercores that are also continuing the decline, and in my opinion here, well, a little bit of both. Maybe there's a bit less activity. It's overall the story that I'm seeing, especially in the US, for instance, right? There's a lot of hope with the vaccinations that are happening in real life that things will be opening up, so you could see a general decline, I think, in just activity, especially in MMOs. They may be hit a little bit harder than other games because, of course, they take a pretty more sizable time commitment, generally speaking. So that may be something that game companies in general have to keep in mind. But of course, we also have the generally deflationary setting that we're finding ourselves in at the moment in EVE, meaning that we're touching 250. 250,000 for the sellers, 242 for the buyers, the lowest price we've seen for hypercores in a while. Good news, of course, for those that use the Hypernet relay, that may be more and more affordable at the moment, increasing their potential profits from their sales through the Hypernet. And that's it for the plex and stuff. So let's move on to minerals coming in at 15 minutes. Here, of course, we'll start with titanium as always, and you may have seen that from the ticker as well. Not so good news. You can see the chart has now gone below 6 ISK for the 5-day, 20-day, and daily averages. We are talking in Jita Station a 593 now for the first sellers, 275 million units, another 115, another 115. It's not outrageous for titanium, but it's definitely a well-supplied market, and buyers are coming in at 565. Not that much of a margin anymore, so I do see a little bit of hesitation, but you know, through the 6.0 ISK mark, the supplies are not slowing down in volumes, which is what I would do, honestly. I would stop now bringing my titanium to the market. We're below 6 ISK. I would wait for times when we get back above 6 ISK, especially now knowing that you know, the super fleet has been unlocked again for the enemies of the Imperium. Not exactly sure what they're named. I'm not really up to date on all of those politics. I don't follow it that much. Just you know, Goon Swarm and things like that were like really big news when I first started playing EVE. So they stick in my mind. It's really not partisanship or anything like that. But overall, I would say big battles may be on the horizon. And if we do see like a super battle, that does tend to have an impact on the titanium market, increasing demand all of a sudden for replacing some of these losses. So right now for titanium, it's you know, it's still on the edge. 595 is not that bad, but I would actually say that it's not a mistake at this point to say I'm gonna actually hold on to my titanium, hoard it a little bit, because this is also a 1-year low point at this point. So I'd be a little bit careful here. For pyrite, we also have a little bit of pressure, but honestly, really no breakdown. This is still a very reasonable price then. 1860 for the sellers, and these buyers, man, that's, well, one jump out in perimeter, they're at 1879. So those must be buy orders that don't have the one jump range. Let's try to get some green stuff here. 1703, and then buy orders in strange stuff happening here, but generally 18.6 for the sellers and 17 ISK for the buyers. Definitely put up a sell order if you have pyrite to sell, but overall, this is still a pretty good price, and on this 1-year chart, it's a nice gain. And next up here for the high-sec miners, it's Mexalon, and here we're starting to, you know, see that pressure confirmed here. We're down to less than 125 on the chart, 120 for the sellers, and 116 for the buyers. Still strong demand volume-wise, right? You can see here 14 million, 27 million. It all looks quite reasonable, but I think that in general, miners are more and more finding their footing. Players that enjoy that playstyle, I think, will eventually pretty easily graduate into those ships. And at the moment, we also, in my opinion, have seen less like big battles, big losses in nullsec. All of that means that we're well supplied in general at the moment. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that if I'm not mistaken, I've read it on Reddit, and it was mentioned in one of the live streams where I think a CCP dev was a guest or something like that, that they are looking at the Rorcal and at the Orca, and that the idea there is to not have this one ship that's basically the best mining ship, period, where it's both a command ship, booster that boosts everyone around it, but on top of that, it has the best yield of the fleet as well. And so what makes most sense, just, you know, 12, 20, 30 Rorcals is better than one Rorcal with a certain number of hulks or machinas and things like that, especially if you want some tank on top of that, right? They're so much bigger that they're looking at that. And so, yeah, I like to mine in my Orca, but we may see nerfs to their mining capabilities at some point. It's nothing official, but it's something to keep in mind, I think, when it comes to mining and the mineral market. my chair is making a lot of noise. I hope it doesn't come through too much. But let's move on now to the isogen market. Still flat, well above 40, but there was this one sell order right here. It's still there for another 3 weeks, 1.9 billion units at 45 ISK. And the fact that other than that, it's basically really flat just below that range, I think is pretty good news, because that means that once it's gone or chew through to the market, I don't think we can make that in time. Then of course supply demand could be a lot more in tandem, and potentially we could start to go up above 45 ISK from there. But of course those 1.9 billion may disappear from the sell orders. They don't disappear from the game. The owner will still have them. He'll probably just have to look for a different strategy rather than dumping all of that stuff in a single sell order in order to try and turn that stuff into ISK. So with a little bit more patience, I think we could see higher prices, because the fact that we touched 40 on a couple of days but we never went below that does show that there is strong demand for the regular supply. It's just that these minerals here have put a stop to any increased prices for the last couple of months. After that, we have the Noxium market flat at its high point. So if you want to mine and make ISK on not too many minerals, it's low sec time. Here is the Noxium price at 13.50 for the sellers, 12.86 for the buyers. Very narrow margin, very high price, and a price range completely dictated by the sellers, of course, because now you have to import that Noxium in order to bring it to the JITA markets. Zydrine is going to be in a similar spot. Yes, in fact, breaking out to another one-year high point above 1500 is at 1700 on a lack of supply. Look at that, 100,000 here, a million here. That's it. Let's take a quick look at Tranquility Trading Tower. A couple of sell orders, but 2 million here. But other than that, it's really not that much. Very, very expensive. Buyers forced up above 1500 ISK. The nullsec, the nullsec. Stranglehold on these minerals, of course, being the sole suppliers of them, is starting to show up here. And when they go to war, when they spend time blowing each other up rather than mining and doing PvE activities, which at the moment it's pretty hard to actually get a lot of resources done, of course. This is the result. They can dictate those prices and they go up quite a lot. So let's see if Megasite is finally moving up. No, this is really surprising. So for me, this is actually decently telling. Megasite still at just 620 for the sellers, 568 for the buyers. I'm going to say here that there are Megasite supplies coming from Triglavian space. It's gotta be the answer. So I gotta make my way there and try to figure that out for myself. But Megasite being like, what is this now? We're almost at practically a third of the price of Zydrine is really not normal without some extra source of Megasite, in my opinion, that is still rolling through the game. And I think it's trick space. So that's interesting. And for both of these, so for nullsec, right, you have Zydrine, absolutely super worth it, 1500 plus, even historically speaking, great price, definitely your focus. And then Megasite, that just hasn't been able to really regain its former glory, its former price range. And for lowsec, it's the same thing. Noxium, yep, that's definitely a very good price. Even historically speaking, I think we're paying a nice premium on Noxium, making it very expensive. And then Isogen, nope, still not. I think a 150 or something like that is a more normal Isogen price, and that's just not happening. So this is something in both of those regions. You have the big winner of those minerals, and then you have the one that's just not budging from the current price range. Finally, we've got the biggest mover, of course. Here is Morphite. Also a little bit of pressure on that one, but 70,000 ISK for the sellers. I think that's still extremely expensive. 65,000 for the buyers. Know that before all of these resource constraints in EVE Online, I used to invest in Morphite when it was below 10,000 ISK. So that gives you a little bit of perspective there. It is definitely super expensive. Next up, we have the PI market coming in at 24 minutes. Like that, and let's see if we can spot anything on the charts here, and that is interesting. Who knows something I don't, because we have another jump up back to the a range above 1.5 million, which is still definitely down from its normal average, but is making it has made up a lot of the loss, the decline here in January, that petered out to less than 1 million ISK per unit of broadcast nodes. So we have another volume spike, so another set of investments in my opinion, and a jump up once we basically went down just a touch from that first recovery. Very impressive actually, 1.6 million for the sellers, and this on really not a lot of buyers here. 1.5 million for the buyers. In the Tranquility Trading Tower it's starting to take shape. So overall, a surprise jump up in broadcast nodes, and I'm reading this as investments, more players, looking at potentially more structure stuff coming out, which I do think it was also confirmed through like one of those guest speakings of the devs, that this is also something that they're working on, right? They're working on more smaller structures that allow you to have a certain influence on your surroundings in the game. It's going to be pretty interesting to see what they can come up with. Next up, we've got construction blocks. So for the refined PI materials, the more base production stuff, it's still just supply demand, and it's really terrible. This is also the things that I produce on this level, so I'm hoarding all of it. So construction blocks, 7,000 for the sellers, just below 6,900 for the buyers. It's basically really a very low price, and no sign, a little bit of a jump here in volumes, but no price response, showing that we're basically still oversupplied despite these low prices. Consumer electronics constantly bouncing around the 6.5 mark, I think 6,600 for a couple of sellers. Outside Jita, it's actually, I should probably go like this, 7.5 for the sellers and 6.2 for those buyers. Coolants, which is what I produce, that's not a chart you want to see. Landing on a 5,000 disc, lost over 50% of the price, in fact 50% from the low point about a year ago. So this is a very, very big loss. Currently going for 6,000 for the sellers, 5,100 for the buyers. This is that deflation. That's not necessarily really deflation. This is probably just a combination of elements, including the deflation that we're seeing, that has probably accelerated things after October. But we had all of this pressure already because of the minerals regaining price. As a result, of course, ISK had to flow from other markets, and then the passive stuff like PI was definitely the biggest casualty so far. Some of the advanced movements as well, but across the board you see it in a lot of these PI materials. Then we've got a specialized cryoprotectant solution material that's holding on at 100,000 disc, 104 for the sellers and 93,000 for the buyers. Again, just like in almost any Eve talk here, these are a little bit different when you see this big jump here up to 230 at the start of a year ago because of an implant introduction. So here you can buy these for less than 100k. I think it's all right to invest a little bit in some of these cryoprotectant solutions, getting ready for a potential implant launch as well. Enriched uranium tied to fuels. Here's another chart you don't want to have to look at, honestly, if you make this stuff or invest in this stuff. 6,600 for the sellers, less than 6k for the buyers. Very, very cheap. And then another advanced PI material, again, confirming that a little bit of a pullback here, and then investors jump back in, more buying, more volume spikes, and trying to get us back just below 1.75 million. It's 1.7 for the sellers, and almost 1.6 for the buyer. So there's definitely renewed interest in advanced PI materials. Mechanical parts for fuel, so here 10k for most of the year, and then in October it just was not sustainable anymore, and so we lost 40% of the value. 6.5 for the sellers, 6,000 disc for the buyers. Then we've got nanites, and nanites is tied to implants, and look at that here, finally breaking down here. The general pressure in refined PI materials does seem to still hold. There's too much supply for the demand. 5,300 for the sellers, 4,600 for the buyers. I would say if you can buy below 5,000 disc on this chart, that's not so bad. And if an implant is launched, that's one point. You're ready. Take advantage of that. You've got cheap nanites to bring to the markets. nano factories, advanced PI, but this one has not really done that well, except, last week. Look at these volumes, definitely renewed interest, but it looks like this one was so oversupplied that could not move the needle on the price. 700,000 for the sellers and 660 for the buyers. Basically, you can still grab very cheap nano factories at the moment, and some people are doing that. Smartly so, I think. Organic mortar applicators here, again, volumes that are back and that are a little bit more maintained. So we have another little jump up in the price, but they are careful enough, right? Except for the broadcast nodes, that's decently aggressive, but it's also one that had lost quite a lot of its price range. In general, here, they push it up to a certain range, but they're careful not to overdo it here. So here, 750,000 for the sellers, 703 for the buyers. A little bit of volumes, but again, nothing too crazy either, which is very smart, I think. Recursive computing modules, we're not seeing that much here. Slight uptick, slight increase in the price, but still going very cheaply, I would say. And then robotics, yeah, more bad news for fuel-related PI materials, staying below 60,000 on the average prices. 62 for the sellers, 56,000 for the buyers. That's extremely cheap. Self-harmonizing power cores, here we go again, confirming the trend here, finally you could say, with a couple of volume spike with not really a big move on the price, but here, the latest one, quite a bit of buying happening, pushing us up well above 1.5 million, 1.65 for the sellers, 1.55 for the buyers as well, forced up here, again, making up quite a bit of the losses that we've had over the last year, but staying well away from like that 2 million more normal range for these power cores. So overall, again, advanced PI materials tied to structures, there does seem to be some interest. This could also be because of the war, of course. Lots of destruction happening as the Imperium space is being burned down by their enemies. Now the keeps are gone. All of that does leave room for new infrastructure to be built at some point. That may be part of the answer here as well. Sterile conduits, another nice volume spike with hardly a response on the price here. Yeah, again, new supply very quickly, just trying to get rid of some sterile conduits, even though it's still below 900,000 disk. 810 for the buyers, but the volumes are there, which is very interesting. Ukomi superconductors, also tied to implants, pretty obviously so. In fact, the one that I think I would have loved to grab some more of than I have at low price, but it never really broke down. I would have loved to buy this below 50k. You would have like a no-brainer where you could potentially easily triple your investment on an implant introduction. It did so twice, so why the hell not? But yeah, it never broke down. It really managed to defend its price very well. 60,000 for the buyers, 66,000 for the sellers. Still pretty expensive actually, in my opinion. So it's hard to say what you should do when it comes to these Ukomi superconductors. And then finally we get wetware mainframes, and finally this one as well had really not done well in the recovery. Couple of volume spikes, hardly a move on the price here, just a little jump away from the absolute 1-year low point of 1 million ISK. But now here, kind of volumes, and then look at these prices going back to 1.5 million. Almost that for the sellers, almost 1.4 for the buyers. So PI in general, advanced PI, definitely seeing increased demand. I think it's investments either for the war, but also I think some speculation on what CCP is going to do next with structures. And then the others are still struggling very much. So except for Ukomi superconductors tied to implants, those do a little bit better, but definitely seeing pressure there as well. Next up, advanced moon materials. That's coming in at 33.20. So here, last week was really interesting. I think that the changes to the Marauders caused a lot of need for more production in, well, some of the biggest Tech 2 ships that you can have, of course. And as a result, we did see a price spike in a lot of the base materials, such as crystalline carbonite for Galente ships. And all right, we're stalling it, right? We're recovering a little bit. We're staying above average, staying above 150 at 155 for the sellers, 153 for the buyers. Look at how aggressive the buyers have become here, but it's nothing too crazy. Basically, we're not spiking up to like 1 year high points or so for the Galente version. Next up, we've got not metamaterials. I'm looking for titanium carbide for Caldari. This one did do a spike up to almost 300 ISK apparently on one day, so that's obviously a lot of interest. That's the golem. It's also the one that I'm shooting for on a longer term now. Not really going to just buy a golem right now. It's a little bit too expensive for that. We're going to take some in-between steps when it comes to the mission running. But that recovery is here. But obviously, we're still paying a pretty nice premium. 190 for the sellers, 174 for the buyers. So well above average here as well. After that, for Minmatar, we have Fernite carbide, another big spike here up to 200, 1 year high point, in fact here almost 250 on one day. So we recovered. There are supplies for this one, and well, let's see if we manage to hold on to 150 for the sellers, 146, 120 for the buyers. So here we're going down towards an average price a little bit more quickly. It's Minmatar, of course. Generally speaking, the least popular one, although some of you guys mentioned that you absolutely love the Varger for missions, so I may have to look into that at some point as well. I actually saw Marquis Dragon use it quite often and quite effectively, so it does have its strength as well. Then we've got tungsten carbide for Amar that has basically recovered to its higher range. This one did not make a 1 year high point and is now probably going down. Well, actually it's 190 still for the sellers, 152 for the buyers. Pretty big margin though. So here we're basically back on the average as a result of this price spike. Well, Paladin is still really popular as well. So I think that this was definitely the changes to the Marauders that have gone through on the base materials. More demand, more need for that. So a big purchase of anything that was available at these low prices definitely made its way through the market. Let's take a look at the impact on the metamaterials then. Photonic metamaterials for Galente. Well, here we go. Nope. Not really what you would expect, I think, but this one is actually going down in price a little bit to well below average price, less than 12,000 for the sellers, 11,000 for the buyers. So we're seeing some pressure here in the first metamaterial. Non-linear for Caldari. This one, all right, moves to its higher bound. That's a little bit more what I would expect to see, right? More demand in general should up the price a bit. It's nothing too crazy though. 22,500 for the sellers, 21,000 for the buyers. It's basically, a little bit above average, nothing too crazy either. Plasmonic metamaterials for Minmatar seeing pressure again. Still a good price, just below 20k, 18,300 for the sellers, 18,000 for the buyers. Narrow margin, so decently aggressive buying here, so they should be able to stall that descent pretty quickly. It's a little bit below, if you want to call 20k the average, a little bit below that, but really not by much. Some pressure though. And then we have the terahertz metamaterials for Amar that also tried to recover a little bit, and some pressure at the end here as well. 17,000 for the sellers, 16.5 for the buyers, showing again in my opinion that the Amar segment for Tech 2 production seems to be the one that's struggling the most. Caldari is the most popular one, and then both Galente and Minmatar are like sort of really the in-between ones. A little bit of volatility, but not that much. Average prices or just below that, nothing too crazy in the metamaterial. So I'm not expecting that much of a move in Tech 2 ships. If both of these had gone, crazy, both the carbides and the metamaterials, yeah, then I would have expected like a big response all of a sudden, and buying last week would have been an amazing move, but it's not really happening. So I'm not sure if that's going to be the case. But let's first of all go take a look at the other advanced movement. So here is fermionic condensate, a little bit of recovery, just like with the advanced PI materials, and able to maintain that price above 70k. Yep, 73 for the sellers, 66 for the buyers. Next up here we got ferrogel, a little bit more volatility away from the bottom, still below average. That's probably going to be the trend here. Yeah, next up Fullerite's landing on 750, so it's no longer the 500 bottom, but clearly still trading below average. Then hypersynaptic fibers, seeing some pressure in fact. Or where are those buyers at? 8,300. That's below the entire chart, so that's a lot of pressure here. Next up, we've got nano transistors, also, you know, stalling the recovery, you could say, holding on to below average prices, but away from the bottom. So it's not bad news, it's just you know, not a full recovery yet. Phenolic composites, again, nice recovery here, but pressure is back, and so we're stuck a little bit below average, but we're definitely doing okay. And then finally, we've got the ceramic fibers, our exception. All right, holding on. I did not expect that to 500 ISK, 517 for the sellers, 460 for the buyers. That's not something that you would expect or that happens very often. A full week and actually a plateau at that 1 year high point when pretty much the entire other category tends to recover very quickly from this spike-like behavior. So is this a cartel move, right? You know, enough players deciding we're just going to start selling above 500, that's it, period. Could be the case here, because it's definitely a move that's against pretty much the entire category here. Next up, the Tech 2 ship market, 40.10. Right, like that. And let's take a look at this here. First of all, we've got the basilisk, yeah, kind of slowing down its volatility, right? If you had lows at 190, highs at 240, that's definitely tradable, but here the volatility is declining and we're basically settling at around 200 million, 200 for the sellers, 187 for the buyers. I would personally wait for a better opportunity to jump in on a basilisk, let's say close to 190, something like that for the buy prices. Then we've got the Cerberus, also coming from a nice period of volatility, lows at 200, highs 250, 280. That's pretty damn good. So we recovered from that. We went down pretty nicely here. This is at 210, but now we're basically slowly moving our way back up. 228 for the sellers, 211 for the buyers, and this is the same thing that I wanted to mention here, and I was trying to explain with plex and things like that. When we were here in this segment here, right below 230 and still going down, this is where you have these daily average prices that you can get at 210, 220. That's pretty easy to then grab one from these buy prices. Now that we are recovering, well, these average prices are all above the 5-day moving average. So yeah, if you want a Cerberus now, you're gonna have to pay 230 million. It's that simple. You're not going to be able to do 212 and try to grab it. It's just super unlikely to happen at this point. So this is really important. I think if you want to try and actually have the best buys, you have to time the buy orders at the right time here. And so that time was probably around 10 days ago for the Cerberus. Then we've got the Guardian for a Mars, clearly showing that lack of volatility here and a little bit of pressure at the tail end here as well. Going back below 200 million on average, 206 for the sellers, 184 for the buyers. We've been lower, so I'm again going to say nope, I wouldn't make a move on these just yet. We're a little bit in the in-between spots with the lack of volatility. So the Hound is actually going back up in price, going up to 27 million for the sellers, 25 million for the buyers. Again, you don't want to buy here. If you happen to still have a couple of Hounds that you bought below 20 million ISK, of course you can sell them now. It's going to be a nice profit, but to jump in at this point is probably not the right time. Ichthyrsa for the Triglavian situation, flat, at least a little bit down from its high of 900 million, currently costing 780, buyers at 708. I think it's basically stable there. I'm expecting a slow, very slow decrease in price, but it really does look like the isolation of the Triglavian space is of course adding to the problems, you could say, with supplies, and that's not going to be easy to fix unless CCP decides to like move the story along or something like that. Ishtar above 200 million ISK, 205 for the sellers, 186 for the buyers, and so here, yeah, you could try to buy one and then hope that we get a full recovery, but the advanced movements are not showing that just yet, so I'd be careful. Manticore, that's a little bit more interesting, right? We went up well above 30 million ISK here last week, and now the decline is here, quite a sharp decline, touching 25 on the 5-day moving average. It's 26 million for the sellers, less than 25 million for the buyers, and so this is now your opportunity. I think if you want to risk a Manticore buy, do so now, grab it below 25 million, and looking at these, it may be just too late, but you may still be able to actually make that happen. Just like right here 4 days ago, when the average price was at 24.7 million, you know, at the height of the decline, that's really when your buy orders have your best chance to trigger. So very interesting chart here. You could still try. I think below 25 million for a Manticore is not that bad. 32 to 35 is definitely possible. As a sell price, I'd say that's a worthy trade, but you know, you gotta be fast, I think, if you're still going to manage to grab it. The Munin 1 year low point, actually 181 for the sellers, 170 for the buyers. Looking at this chart, right, trying to buy one for 170, I would not blame you. I think that does make sense. I would not buy more than one considering these volumes. Nemesis, bit of pressure here as well, but nowhere near its low point. 24 for the sellers, 21 for the buyers. I would say too early. Wait for more precipitous decline so that you can try and grab here again before this. Right here, last couple of days, that's where you want to make your move. Next up, we've got the Oneros recovering from a third spike up to 200 million. At the moment, selling for 200, and the buyers at 178. Big margin opening up here. So potentially we could here see that exact pattern again. If too much supply comes in, it crashes down that market. You know, the previous opportunity was at 160. Before that, at 170. If we continue on that trend, you could look at. Maybe we can crash down to less than 170, right? That's only 4 sell orders on enough supply. That could happen, and then you could try to buy below 170. That would be how I would sort of try to do that. If of course another decline like this one and this one is what's starting right now. That's always difficult to say, of course. As in general, I'm getting the vibe that volatility is ending or is slowing down in the tech-to-ship market in general. The Panther up in price to the 1.1 million average. Yeah, 1.1 for the sellers, just below $1 billion for the buyers. I think here, yeah, the battleships, it's just being pushed up because of all of that extra demand from the Marauders. Then we've got the Purifier. That's a nice decline. That's interesting. Well below 25 million on the chart. We are talking 24 for the sellers, 23 million for the buyers. And you can see first couple of investors, I would say, have made their moves, and they're saying, I'm going to go just above 23 million to really try and make that buy order happen. So we're again like a little bit too late. If we had been here 4 days ago, then you can clearly see here 24 million easy purchase. Now it's tricky. You could try below 24 million. I think you still have a chance to do that, but it's interesting to see this pattern show up here, and I think these buy orders are from people that are keeping a close eye on this market. But if we could push through this, it's not going to happen considering what these daily averages are doing. I don't expect it to happen, I should say. But you know, this, when they were not here, you can see that these were here 3 days ago, 4 days ago. Yeah, 3 days ago. That's when they moved in at 23 million. You could have tried below 23, and probably this was the exact right time, 4 days ago, right here, when you could have bought some below 23 million. And so that's playing that market. At least we're seeing some volatility here in the Purifier and a Mars ship on top of that. The first one where I would say, yeah, definitely still, you could try to still grab a couple of those. Then we've got the Scimitar showing pressure as well, going back below 200 million. Unfortunately for me, a little bit too slow and not exactly low enough. Then we've got the Widow confirming that higher cost for Tech 2 battleships, at least well above 1.1 billion here, almost 1.2 now for the sellers, almost 1.1 for the buyers. And then finally we've got the Zealot that is flattening out at 180. This can happen as well, of course, if volatility really isn't there, that you basically keep meandering around that low point, and then it's probably a game of patience, which is also why I warn you, especially stuff like the Zealot here. Looking at these volumes, I would buy one now. You know, definitely if you can buy one close to 170, I don't think it's a bad purchase, but I would never like buy a dozen or really double down on that too much. Next up, Tech 3 ships. Let's take a look at those at 48.40. And as always, we'll start with the destroyers, which so far in the last couple of weeks have basically been pretty flat around that 47-ish million range, I'm going to say, for the sellers. And they were okay supplied, nothing crazy, nothing too little. So let's see if that trend continues. Here is the confessor, 47 million just below that. Buyers are at 42. One new seller in the last 24 hours. But what still remains, 1029 here, should keep things pretty stable in my opinion. So not really seeing any changes here. Hecate, slight move up to a higher average range. We're talking 48 million for the sellers, 45 million for the buyers. So you definitely, can see that there's a bit more interest in bringing Hecate to the market, but it's on just like a 1.3 million margin, and here it is, like 6-7 new sell orders, 15-13. It's a little bit more, but I would say it's still nothing completely crazy. This isn't going to crash the market, and it's quite normal considering you're still getting at least somewhat of a premium for the Hecates. Then we've got the Jackdaw that's actually seeing a little bit of pressure. Okay, our first move here, definitely some pressure. We're going below 45 million for the Jackdaw, for on average 46 for the sellers, 41 for the buyers. And all right, a couple of days ago here you can start to see these volumes go up in maybe the last week or so. 35, 23. This is a decent chunk of Jackdaws that is going to at least stall things. The question is, we're still seeing half a dozen new sell orders. If this slows down, we'll still be fine. If more Jackdaws find their way to the market, a buy opportunity may be formed, but it's still too early to say. Now we do see our first little bit of a move, slight oversupply apparently over the last week or so in the Jackdaw market. And then finally we've got the Zwepel flat above 45. Yeah, not that much to say here either. 47.4. Less supply. It's also the least popular one. One seller order in the last 24 hours. 43 million for the buyers. So honestly, there is definitely room for the Jackdaw to slow down, the Confessor and the Zwepel to pick up a little bit of that slack. The Hecate still has that nice premium that's also drawing in quite a bit of supply. In general, we're not oversupplied. It's just that if the Jackdaw continues, that's something that we have to keep an eye on. If this continues to decline on more supplies, then we may want to make a move on that, but it's definitely still too early. The percentages are still too low. Then we've got the cruisers with the Legion going back to a 180, I would say, high average price. Oh no, actually we're pushing right through that apparently, as the sellers have gone down to 174. All right, and this last 24 hours, full page, this is more Legions than a lot of these destroyers, so that's not so good. Quite a bit of supply, crashing the price in fact back down towards 175-ish, probably the actual average price. Then we've got the Loki, also seeing some pressure on this one. 169 for the sellers, 155 for the buyers. Supply wise, last 24 hours, again more than half a page. It's a little bit of oversupply coming in. Here we get a Proteus flat at 160, and then if you look at this supply, right, half a dozen, that's more reasonable. So this one is stable, although some sellers are aggressive, well below 160. And then we've got the Tengu that is also doing all right. So I'm not expecting anything too crazy. Actually, it's a full page here again. 186 for the sellers, 173 for the buyers. All right. I don't dare to make real predictions on the cruiser market. I think it's basically small enough to be manipulated to hell and back. But the Loki decline and the Legion declines here, this one especially, which will have more momentum next week, could be interesting. But I definitely personally need to see really low prices on the buy orders before I take a gamble on this one again. And that means that we get to move on to the extra product for the week, and I chose the faction cruisers. It's been a while since we've taken a look at those. 5310. Let's take a look at that. Cruisers. Faction cruisers. I generally start with the pirate faction cruisers. So here is the Ashimu, landing on 60 million. There's not that much to say here. It's not a great platform. I love how it looks, but it doesn't tend to be like a very popular one in PvE. just above 60 million, slightly above average, and basically recovering from a period of a lot of demand. Then we've got the Cinnabel. That's more interesting. 1 year low points and currently selling for 107 million, buyers below 100 million ISK. Again, look at these daily averages. If you want to make that Cinnabel investment, you can definitely try to do so right now. You are buying them at a 1 year low point. But what may be the reason? Over farming somewhere? You never know, of course. This is a very interesting and quite surprising chart. And in fact, this is also a ship that people said perhaps you should look into the Cinnabel rather than the Vexor for those low-level missions, probably because of its weapon system being like immediate impact, still has decent range. It is probably a better fit for fast and efficient. I'm looking for, all around really good. What I like about the Vexor is that I can also do low-level transport missions with them, for instance. Next up, we've got the Ortrus, flat below 190. So in general, it's an expensive ship, but on this chart, it's basically flat at a low range at the moment, so affordable. Next up, we've got the Phantasm, 100 million. Right around its average, not that much to say. The Stradios I'm interested in. All right, a decline in the Stradios, going for 185 million at the moment, 175. Considering the entire chart, it's definitely in the affordable range at the moment. And then we've got the Gila, of course, 180 million as well, but also declining well below average at the moment, 177 for the sellers, 158 for the buyers. And then finally we get the Vigilant, that's flat, also at its average range, but decently affordable. So a lot of these below 200 million ISK. You can see that we have been at 230 for the Gila, we've been at 210 for the Stradios. I think the Phantasm jumped up to 180 at one point here. Ortrus probably at 240, 210, definitely a possibility as well. Interesting, pirate faction cruisers in general, I'm going to say decently affordable at the moment. So if you want to, have that extra couple of Gilas for the Abyss and things like that, you could definitely look into that right now. Then we've got some Navy factions. Let's take a look at the Stormbringer. Also something for the longer term. We're gonna look into these Vorton projector skills and ships. 240 for the sellers, 215 for the buyers. I think that's quite okay considering what we're seeing with the pirate faction ships. So at least Stormbringer now feels affordable in a good spot. Augur Navy issue, so Amar going back up to above 60 million ISK, yeah, 63 for the sellers, slightly above average. Last move has been up in the last month or so. Caracal Navy issue is flat at a high point of 100 million. Is that? Yeah, 100 million for a Caracal Navy issue. I actually like this one for exploration as well. And then so we would expect the Executor Navy issue for Galente flat at 60 million. So that's probably the low end of its range. Omen Navy issue, a little bit all over the place, but I would say expensive at the moment. 73 million. And what the hell is that? All right, if anyone can explain that in massive purchase here, is it nullsec? Did someone make an Omen Navy issue fleet? That's definitely possible, but that has had a pretty big price response all of a sudden, 74 million, back to a high point. Osprey Navy issue for Kaldari, slight decline, but still very expensive, above 80. Side fleet issue, around average, I'm going to say. Stabber fleet issue around average, I'm going to say as well. And then the Vexor Navy issue around average as well. So for the Navy faction cruisers, what we definitely don't see anymore here is, for instance, Caracal, flat at a high point of 100 million for the last 3 or 4 months. That doesn't mean that the Galente ships are actually flat at a 1 year low point for another 4 months. Back in the day when it was all about LP in faction warfare, by the party that gained the upper hand would have a lot of LP and would have very cheap ships, and the other one would be super expensive. That's gone a little bit, and as a result now you can just look at general situations, and I think that just depends on their popularity. So Caracal Navy issue, great ship, very popular, far more expensive, and Vexor Navy issue apparently declined quite severely in its value when it lost all of that drone action it could bring. But we are seeing some big purchases here. Stabber fleet issue, that's a big volume spike, and the Omen Navy issue, that's definitely a standout volume spike here as well. That actually pushed the price up to 1 year high point. So it's all about the meta, I think, my theory is going to be nullsec for those volume spikes in these Navy faction cruisers right here. Yeah, so that's going to be it for this week, guys. Thank you very much for watching and listening, and as always, I'll see you next time.